taught ceramics for a long time, many years ago in college level, and been in a lot of ceramics theaters. I see people struggle with trimming a lot. And lots of times I look at them and I say, yeah, I couldn't trim with that either. So I think that people assume you can use a tool right off the shelf, and I don't believe that's really a very good idea. So I just wanted to show you the simplest way to put an edge on a trimming tool. I wanted to do that. I wanted to show you a bunch of homemade tools to maybe kind of expand your ideas that there are about tools, and that there are ways to develop the special tools that you need for what you're doing without necessarily buying something right off the shelf, or altering tools. And then I threw some pots about 24 hours ago that are just some balls that are under that plastic there, and I thought I'd do some trimming, and I'll show you some little trimming tricks and how I was taught to do it, how I was taught to trim pots. Okay, so I have all kinds of grinders and belt sanders and stuff in my shop for doing this kind of stuff, but really all you really need is a file, and I wanted to show you how that you can sharpen these tools. You don't need to have equipment. You don't need to have a grinding machine or anything like that. Actually, a grinder is kind of difficult to use with this stuff because these tools are so thin, there's so little mass to them. They heat up as soon as you touch the stone. And when a steel tool gets, changes color, it gets red hot, or you see it change on the surface, you've kind of burned the steel and it's not going to hold an edge as well. So you got to be really careful doing, putting these kind of tools on a grinding wheel. Although a grinding wheel is very good for more shaping tools rather than sharpening. But I just wanted to show you don't need a whole lot. So I had a bunch of files. So I stopped at the hardware store and bought a brand new file to start with. A file really needs to be kind of sharp to work. If you try to sharpen something with an old, worn-out file, you'll just be frustrated. So I bought a sharp one to show you. Nicholson is the sort of standard good quality name in files, so you can't go wrong buying a Nicholson file. And that's usually usually in a hardware store you'll find sort of cheap Chinese files, and you'll find Nicholson files. And this one is an 8-inch bastard. This is a type of cut called a bastard cut. So this is what's called a bastard cut file, and it's also called a mill file. Okay, so files come in a great variety of shapes this way, and they come in a great variety of cross sections, and they come in a variety of how deeply they're cut, fine to coarse. And the coarser ones are, did I bring any double cut? These are all single cut. A coarser file you'll see is cut across in two directions, and you got like this diamond pattern on them. I like these mill files for sharpening tools. I think 8 inches is a convenient size. If you're just using it for sharpening, a flat one is fine. If you're going to use it for more general use, a half round shape, I must have one someplace, that's flat on one side and curved on the other, is good for more general use. But for sharpening, I think this one's going to work just fine. It says mill bastard on it, which is not a commentary, but a proper name for this. Now, a couple other things about files. Files are hardened steel, right? So that makes them very hard, so they'll last long and they'll cut softer metals. But it also makes when you make steel hard like that, you also make it brittle. So you never want to use a file to like pry with or something, because you can snap a file. Okay. Somebody's phone. Just as an aside, you might notice if you're looking at files, you'll notice it's cut across both faces, and it's also cut on the edge, right? So the edge cut on the file allows you to cut into a corner, right? Because you can also file with just the edge of this. File my nails with it. But sometimes if you're filing into a corner, you don't want to damage the corner. So when you look at files, you'll see that some of these don't. Some of them have what's called a safe edge. So they'll have one side is cut and one side is smooth. So if you're going like into a corner, you can file this surface without damaging the adjacent surface. That's just a couple of little background things on files. Also files, I'm really bad about this because I got so many of them, but you really not supposed to throw files in a drawer where they're going to rub against each other. They really should be protected from each other. And they also rust very easily, so you want to make sure they stay dry. Well, here's a half round. So for general use, this is a coarser cut half round. I don't know if it has a name on it. The next thing I want to mention about files is that if you read anything about the files, the first thing they'll tell you about is only use a file with a proper fitting handle, which is one reason I bought a new one, because it has a handle on it. And I'm usually like a real nut about safety stuff, because I've hurt myself and seen people get hurt. For 60 years of doing this stuff, I've seen people get hurt, and hurt myself. But I have so many files around that I'm just used to using them without a handle. But the danger is that if it catches, or if something kicks it back or something, you're vulnerable to the tang. It's called the tang of the file. So you're really, to make things official, I got one with a handle, and that's really what you should do. And I've got a big scar in my palm from a file that got plunged into my palm. So it really can be dangerous. Now, that was working on a lathe, which you're not doing, but they can be dangerous. So you really should get a file. You just go to the store. I think this was like $8 or something. Get a file that has a handle. It's more convenient and it's a lot safer. Okay, so again, I'm showing files because I just want to show you something low tech that's accessible to anyone. So when you buy one of these tools, now the Dolan type tools come a little sharper and they're a little better steel, and these are the Kemper tools, which are the cheaper ones that we've all grown up using. They look at first glance like they're sharp because there's a bevel on them, right? But that bevel if you notice, that bevel wraps all the way around. So what that tells me is this tool hasn't been sharpened. As a tool, this is just a ribbon of steel that's produced as a ribbon with two sloping edges, right? So it's sort of, the material's kind of begun to be sharpened to begin with, but I mean, these are not sharp. Oh, okay, so another thing about sharpening, how do you test things are sharp? You see people go like this, well, yeah. That's obviously not the great way to do it. If it's dull, it'll skid across your nail. Like, this is not that sharp, I'm ashamed to say. If it's really sharp, you'll feel it catch on your finger, and that's the safest way to tell if you
make a little cut.
It won't even cut. You'll just feel it kind of, it'll just kind of grab a little bit on your, I don't know.
Yeah, that makes
Well, we'll see if we can get one of these sharp enough to do that. I should sharpen this thing. But yeah, that's the safest way to test any kind of sharpening. And you can also look at the edge. If a tool is not sharp, in good light, you can often see like a little line of light right there that'll indicate what that edge is. And you kind of want to make that go away. Okay, so I do use these tools. I've tried a zillion different tools, and I have to say that the standard, we used to call them pear cutters, I don't know what you call them, the standard shape really works really well. So here's a bunch that have been sharpened. They need to be resharpened, but you can see what happens. I'll pass them around as you use these and you sharpen them. Because they're so soft and you sharpen them frequently, they start thinning out really quickly. But I think of them as consumable tools, like a razor blade. They're going to get used up. Also, what I've learned to do, it's not true of this one, is generally I only sharpen one side, because if you start sharpening from both sides, the whole thing just disappears, over a few sharpenings. So I used to, when I do a lot more throwing, I used to have like a left hand and a right hand one that were sharpened from two edges. But if you pass these around, look at them, you'll see how changed they are from the way they look when they're, those are not all that sharp, but you could trim with them. So here's a tool that we just took right off the shelf from the store. And you know what these are like when they come. So you just need a surface to work on. You can't, you don't want to like hold it and do it in the air. And most of my life I've just done it just like this, right on the edge of a table. we put a board down here because I don't want to get iron filings on here, and then if somebody's working in porcelain, they're going to pick it up and say, where do those little black spots come from after it's glazed and fired, right? Yeah. So, so you can just do this right on the edge of a table, works just fine. A little more convenient is, I actually have bigger ones of these, but this is a very inexpensive sort of entry level, what's called a bench pin, a jeweler's bench pin. So it's just a piece of wood that's shaped like this with a little clamp. I had to arrange this because the table doesn't have an overhang to clamp on, you know, so I kind of artificially made one. So, let's see. So this is, so you can see that this is convenient. You can hold tools in different convenient kind of ways if you have this kind of thing. But really just the edge of the table works just fine too. So, an important thing to know about filing, that if you haven't done it before, you see people do this. You don't saw with a file, because all you're doing is clogging the file, okay? So, and you can just holding the file at a low angle, and I'm just stroking it. It's not hard work, and then as I get around to the corner, kind of rolling the tool around that corner. There's no need to sharpen it any more than that. And you'll find that it cuts coarser in one direction and a little finer cut in the other sometimes. Got a ways to go here. If you're on a table, you just hold it here. You like that. With chisels or plane blades, if you're looking at the cross section, you know you've got an angle like this. So with a chisel, you're grinding it first against a grinding wheel, right? So since you're putting it against the grinding wheel, I'm exaggerating, you get this hollow ground, right? When you take a chisel and you hold it on a grinding wheel, you get a hollow grind like this. And then you take it and you move it to a stone where you hand sharpen it, and where you hone it, and the stone gives you these two flats. So the sharp blade in the end looks like this, and then it's hollow ground, and it's like this. So you're just maintaining this sharp edge here, right? And as you sharpen several times, eventually, you know, this hollow grind reduces and reduces until it's flat. Then that's when it goes back on the grinding wheel, and you hollow grind it again, and you're just honing the edges. So the blade, to exaggerate, you know, in the end, the blade looks like this, and these would be shiny here, you know. And we're not doing a hollow grind. I'm just telling you that as sort of as a background. We're doing a flat grind. As you sharpen this surface, however you do it, it raises a little burr over here, right? So, and that's what you can feel if you draw your hand backwards. You can even feel it. Feel here. You can feel on the inside if you draw your hand.
Yep.
Yeah, especially up here.
Yeah.
Pass it around.
Yeah.
You can. So like when you do this, when you sharpen a chisel or a plane blade, after you've honed it, you always put the back of it down on the stone and give it a lick just to take off that bevel. So even with these, you want to take that burr off. Can you feel it?
Yeah.
You can take out, if you have, like this is a little round file, we call it a rat tail file. I could clean up that burr, but actually just a piece of this, wrap it around where's the sharpened side? Just that's enough to, well, it's not softening. What it's doing is it's again, exaggerating, of course, but it's changing this by taking that off, by dressing this flat. Now you're bringing it to a sharp point. And also those burrs can get raggedy enough that they'll, they can cut you, it'll be dangerous. So it's good to think in terms of sharpening and then knocking down the underside of it. When you sand wood, the idea is to always have it on a block, right? Because A, it keeps it a flat surface, and B, and I've done this plenty of times, you're sanding with a little piece of sandpaper, and it raises a bit of the grain, and it raises a splinter, it goes right in your hand. So it's a safety and an efficiency thing. You should always use a block if it's a flat surface. But this is how you fold sandpaper. If you want to make a package like this, there's a proper way to do it. So I'll show you this. It's not really totally relevant to what we're doing, but it's a good thing to know.
Those of us who are too old have taken shop.
Right. So or too young, they don't have shop anymore.
They don't? Oh.
So I folded it in both directions, right? Now I'm going to take, I could do it with a knife. Oh yeah, take a knife. Cut it like that. Now, fold it in, you fold it in, you fold it in. And you have a pad, and there are no abrasive surfaces on each other. You don't want to fold it this way because it's rubbing on each other. So there are no abrasive, and then when these get worn out, you can open it out and refold it the other way. Very cheap commercial diamond stone. And here's a regular oil stone. So with a knife, you can work on a stone. In other words, the sharpening instrument is stationary and the tool is moving. With these, I guess you could do this. Let's give it a try.
Is that a whetstone or an oil stone?
It's an oil stone.
What's the difference? You put oil on that one.
Yeah, there are two kinds.
Use
Stones are
water?
either, some stones are
Okay.
well, it's confusing because the word wet, W-H-E-T, means to sharpen, right? But when you say a whetstone, you don't mean that. You mean that, well, if you read a book and they say they used a whetstone on the side out in the field, that's what they mean, W-H-E-T. But there are water stones and there are oil stones. There are advantages to both. This is an oil stone, and it's two-sided. It's got a fine and a coarse side. Let's see what it's like trying to sharpen. Well, play with it. Actually, this is working great. This is probably the way to do the doling tools.
Does the oil like just make it easier to go over? Or?
The oil helps like move the filings away.
Okay.
Floating the
okay.
filings
Okay,
away.
so you're not, okay.
Yeah, it's not lubricating because that's actually the
Okay.
opposite of what you want to do, right?
Yeah, right, okay.
What is the oil doing? I didn't hear you.
The oil is, there are tiny particles being removed. So the oil kind of moves that off the stone. So if it's an oil stone, you should always use it with oil. If it's a wet stone, usually you keep them submerged so they're saturated and you use water. It's sort of the water stone's like a Japanese tradition more. Ooh, that's getting sharp.
Oh, yeah.
A flat edge, this would be a good candidate for the stone because here I can like feel it till I'm on the right. Again, I'm not used to doing this because I do it on a machine at home. I think chatter. North Side diamond stone, which I think can be used wet, dry, or with oil. Oh, that's good. That feels
Wow,
better.
listen to the difference with
I'm glad.
These are not
Inside, and I use something small.
Right. Oh, that's
So
great.
you're doing the outside.
You want to apply a little pressure so you feel like you're really doing work, not just kind of like, because you are, you're removing steel, it's work.
So that's a diamond.
Oh boy, that's sharp.
Oh.
Now again, I don't really feel it, but I'm just gonna give it just a licking here. So, let's see here. And I can see the dirt, right?
The black.
Yeah, if that gets in your, put a clear glaze over that, you'll get iron spots. The fettling knives I would sharpen just like you'd sharpen any knife.
See, I never sharpen knives, Dan. I gotta be honest, I'm terrible. Yeah.
So you are going back and forth.
That's.
Well,
my
yeah, but
question, yeah.
I'm not rubbing it back and forth. I'm pushing it and bringing it back. Okay, and that's also with a file. You're cutting on the push, and then you're just bringing it back. Or with knife sharpening, some people,
Do a circular.
do
I like fingers.
this. Sometimes you do a figure eight, but I don't know how you repeatedly do figure eights. It seems like totally counterintuitive to me.
Now, you're only
It's-
doing one side again.
No, I'm doing both sides, and I'm keeping it at a low angle, and I'm just drawing it on the stone. Right? This is like how you sharpen a pocket knife or a paring chef's knife or anything. You're keeping it at a low angle, and one way to think about it is, picture that you're like peeling something off the top of the stone, right? Like you're.
Yep.
With a flame, you might know this from kilns. The hottest part, you have that. You don't see it too well. There's a cone there. You see, that's the hottest spot. See how fast that's heating up. And even as I move the torch down here, it's already cooling up at the top, right?
Yep.
So, if you had if you had a curved if you had a piece of pipe, you could put it down, just hammer it over a piece of pipe and get a nice curve. I mean, doing it like this with a pair of pliers, I'm not going to get the nicest kind of curve. So, kind of straighten it. Get it really hot, we can adjust it. The idea is you get something cherry red and plunge it, it makes the steel really hard. Right? Like that's how they make files. Although some steels are designed to be plunged in oil and there are variations. But basically you quench, really hot steel, it gets very hard. And typically like a knife making or something, you do that first and you got it really hard, and then they slowly reheat it to a dull yellow, and that tempers it, right? So that gives you, so it's not super hard. And you could, again, now I can take a file here. I trim with it like it's meant to be. I use it for decorating, and I also throw on it.
Yeah.
Because I make these plaster bats. I like throwing on plaster, which is sort of a lost technology. People don't do it so much anymore. I really like throwing on plaster because then as your piece is drying, this side is drawing water too. So in my shop I work with plaster every day. So I made a rubber mold that makes this bat. And when I mix too much plaster, I just pour it in there. I've got tons of these. And I just put them on my Giffen grip, and that's what I throw on. And just like change them out. And so I don't even have these things on my wheel head.
Yeah.
I don't have the pins. So, yeah, I even use the Giffen grip for that. And actually, these are high. I've got lower ones so they don't extend up like that. All right. So then, the way I was taught to put this on center, first of all, you got to decide what you're going to center it to, right? So the easiest thing is to center it somewhere in the trimming area, because that's what you're going to try to bring to concentricity, right? So the way I was taught to do it is that the piece is off. Like you see people do this, right? And then you got to stop and shift it and stop. And sometimes that's what you'd have to do, and that makes sense. And it's really hard to know where you touched. So this is how I was taught. Use two fingers, use a thumb and a finger like this, and so you feel it go boom, 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 boom. Like that. So you see what I'm doing? So you have 3 equal points, 1, 2, 3. So now you can perceive the speed of the rotation, the rhythm of the rotation, because it goes boom, boom, and then you hit it over here, boom, boom. So actually what I do to do the first, cleanup of the trim, is I just use a wire, and this is just like an old piece of cut-off wire, and I cut the shape out of plexiglass and wrap the wire around it. But you can make these out of anything. You can find old cheese cutters, anything with a wire. And so this offers no resistance at all, so you're not going to throw the piece off. You're not going to grab the piece and throw it off center. It instantly just kind of cleans up. And even if you just held a cut-off wire like this, you can do it without even having a special tool. But I think a wire is a good way to start. Really tight, but even just, and painters, use a maul stick,
Yeah.
I'm going to use your head.
I find this really, as a matter of fact, I just put a fixture on the wall next to my wheel just for this. Hey. You should do it softer if you can actually throw the foot, Somewhere in that box, I've got a little one of these made out of a little ruler. Works really well, but
A little
couldn't
ruler?
find. Yeah, a little 6-inch metal ruler. And
Oh.
I think I saw some ceramic magazine. I think they're actually selling sharpening tools. It's an old Korean potters used to do this. It's an old technique. But I like how you go from this texture to that texture.
Yeah.
So you just hold it loosely? So it
You
won't-
hold it, and you got to find the right. It takes some experience. You got to find the right angle. It's something that people like wood turners are always trying to avoid doing, but
Right.
used decoratively like this. Yeah, that's not bad. Let me get one other thing. If you have like a way off center thing, and you're trying to trim it with the whole flat of the
Exactly.
tool, you're cutting too much. So for the truing up part, on a lathe you'd be using a little gouge or something, but you're using a small, like some of those small tools we had around here. Right now, I'm just using a sharp edge. So you
Right.
just
Oh,
you're trimming. You're just taking a little off at a time to get
Right,
it running.
yep.
Running trim.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay, so let me just finish.
And you figured out how much depth you have already, right? You didn't say anything, but that's the other.
Well, I left these pretty thick on the bottom. but I knew
Okay.
I'd be trimming.
Yeah, but we should do, yeah.
It doesn't hurt to leave a lot there and just trim it off. I mean,
Yeah.
just
That's
I mean,
kinda what
clay
I
is going to get recycled even. I mean, it's not like you're wasting material. That's the nice thing about a Giffen grip. You can take it up and look at it and put it back really
Yeah,
easily.
right.
You know, right? It's one of the nice things about it.
I like it.
A square. See what I can do with this. bad habit. No, I'm okay.